I really have no idea how to start this spoiler review for episode 5 of Amazon Prime's Rings of Power. I probably should have counted the number of times I facepalmed during this episode. As a matter of fact, it was probably a good idea I was watching this on a TV and not at the computer desk, because I would have given myself a traumatic brain injury head desking myself through this show. I keep thinking they can't possibly get any worse with this show. And then Amazon says, "Hold my beer," and proceeds to disprove my optimism. I know I already said this, but I'm about to spoil the hell out of a show that Amazon has already rotted to the bone. We start out with the Hobbits. No, I will not call them Harfoots. I refuse to go along with Amazon's stupidity on that front. Their showrunners admitted the only reason they are in this show about the Second Age is because they think you, the audience, are too stupid to understand this is supposed to be Lord of the Rings, without them having hobbits in it. It is the same reason the Probably Wizard is there too. If they really are bound by legal contracts not to deviate too much from lore, as if that is really a concern at this point, then they are probably going to either merge the two blue wizards into the stranger, or it is one of the blue wizards. If they are not bound by contracts, my guess is Saruman. Having it be Gandalf would be too much. Anyway, Nori and her little group are still trying to catch up with the psychopaths who left them behind. Of all the hobbits, Nori is probably the best of them, but that's not saying much. She's not massively annoying. She looks like she's actually trying to make something of this mess of a script, and her accent work is not as community theater level bad. Everyone else are poorly acted and even more poorly written. And then we get the singing. I wanted to mute the television. It was that bad. And while that caterwauling was going on, we got the worst transition I have seen thus far on this show. The transitions were a small, bright spot that made me want to give the first couple episodes something other than a 1. We eventually get to the Probably Wizard looking up at the sky, and they manage to make the moon look so fake it is almost laughable. Well, it is either laugh or cry, and I'm resisting the tears thus far. After that, we get a view of what seem to be elves looking over the Probably Wizard's landing spot. And that is it. We don't see them again. No hint who they are, no words uttered to tell us what they are doing, nothing to even indicate whether they are with the orcs or with the elves in the coming fight. Nothing. Just on to the next scene. With orcs, or more specifically, an orc, cowering under his covering as he approaches Adar. Adar is boring me. He's another elf? Not acting very elvish, above and beyond his hanging out with the orcs, that is. He is staring up at the sun and waxing philosophical, hinting he is going to put out the sun or something. If you pause on this scene, the extra info box that shows up suggests he is an orc, or at least a part orc. Whatever. The whole scene is dumb and pointless. Adar tells the orc to summon the legions, and we cut to Bronwyn being Bronwyn. The actress who portrays her was the second or third most annoying person in the media campaign during the run-up to the premiere of the show. She made sure all and sundry knew she was an activist, and so was her character. Unlike Sophia Nomvet and her portrayal of Disa, Nazanin Boniadi has not stuffed her ego down in order to try and make Bronwyn likable. She has not had enough time on screen to be too annoying. That ended this episode. She was in full-on girl boss mode, something we will see later elsewhere. She apparently took some time between last episode and this episode to think about the message Arendir brought back from the orcs, and decided she is going to lead the farmers and artisans and children and old ladies in the defense of the Elven Tower against an army of orcs. Without weapons. Against an army of orcs. Retarded. She went from practically a village outcast to wanting to play commander of the fort? Whatever, Amazon, whatever. She just about has the poor bastards convinced when Krusty McFarmer from last episode comes forth to say they should go join the orcs like their ancestors did. And half the crowd of the fort was like, "You know what? Human-eating orcs really aren't all that bad. That sounds like an awesome idea. And they decamp, following Krusty McFarmer like he is the Pied Piper of morons. The smart move would have been to barricade the tower, with rubble from some interior stone walls if possible, and head west. But there are no smart people on this show that do not live in Moria. Now, last episode left us with Muriel rallying her people to head off to war in the Southlands of Middle-earth. Isildur was one of the first to volunteer in the courtyard scene outside, and most of the royal court in the palace seemed to be with her. This week, consistency has been thrown out the window, as every scene in Numenor has been written for maximum tension. If you are a simpleton who forgot what happened last week, that is. We open on Numenor with Isildur trying to convince his father to give him a place on one of the ships, and Elendil saying there is no room for someone who has no qualifications. And with that, they have tossed Elendil into the retarded pile of characters that populate this show. In the palace, the nobles have suddenly remembered they are anti-elf bigots and don't want sons of Numenor to die helping an elf and a Southlander wage a war that has nothing to do with them. Arian, Elendil's daughter, is also suddenly an anti-war, or possibly an anti-elf, protester, as she is in the crowd watching this with horror and determination on her face. She hauls Keeman out of the crowd and demands he talk to his father and convince him to convince the queen that she made a mistake. He tries to tell her that his father doesn't listen to him, but she gets a disappointed look on her face and chastises him for not even trying. Keeman promptly looks like she just neutered him, and his actions later shows he is definitely under the spell of her lady parts. Not Aragorn finally got his hands on a forge and is busy forging sword blades to his heart's content when he is summoned to the queen. We get a whole quarter of an hour into the show without being bitch-faced. Galadriel's on camera for less than a minute and I already had too much of her, and she had not even spoken yet. Then she spoke and my face went into my palm. I have no words left for what the writers have done to Galadriel as a character, nor for what Morfydd Clark has done to her through her performance, if you want to call it a performance. Her obsession starts frothing at the mouth, lying to the queen even as not Aragorn is practically screaming with his body language that he wants nothing to do with the crazy elf's plans. The queen is sensing some of this, and just leaves after warning both of them that they better pull off their part of this nutso idea. Not Aragorn then glares at Super Elf and tells her he isn't interested, and rips off his sigil. He drops it on the map table and leaves. Have I mentioned the hobbits are psychotic yet? Well, they are. We get a scene where the two black female hobbits are nagging Lenny Henry, saying he should have taken Nori's little group's wheels and left them behind even more definitively than he did. Oh, I forgot that Nori and Not Sam found war tracks before that. Apparently the hobbits went away they usually don't go and are blaming the stranger for the lack of everything. They then show one of the black ladies forging in a pretty barren forest when Nori and Not Sam scare her trying to warn her about the wargs. The wargs show up and the probably wizard slams the ground, sending them flying. The wargs haul on out of there and the probably wizard shows he hurt his arm doing what he did. I think I mentioned earlier that Girl Boss mode would be activated elsewhere, and that elsewhere is Numenor. For reasons, Galadriel shows up in a courtyard where Elendil is instructing soldiers in swordsmanship, and you immediately know exactly how the next few minutes is going to go. The only not completely predictable thing about this entire scene was one of Isildur's buddies actually managing to touch her, earning a promotion for doing so. Otherwise, that half-dozen or so soldiers were completely outmatched, just as the bad fight choreographer showed them how to be. Seriously, the fight choreography was laughable. It looked like bad 1970s or 1980s Hong Kong kung fu movie fights. And I can now completely understand Morfydd Clark when she said she had to go to therapy after playing Galadriel. After seeing her in that scene, I need therapy. Did they not send her to get training of any kind before shooting this series? In addition to that, Númenóreans were excellent warriors who would eventually go on to beat Sauron in battle. At least they were in the books. Elves did not look down upon them with such contempt as Galadriel did watching them train. And then we go back to Keeman. He finally located his testicles enough to confront his father, who promptly removes them again. Pharazôn tells the idiot that there are good reasons he is backing Miriel. He says that he is not taking orders from an elf as his son suggests, and that soon elves will take their orders. He explains that Númenor stood to gain in trade and influence over a new kingdom of men by returning a long-lost king to them. Keeman is still in the grips of Irian's lady parts and stares at his father's back with an angry, determined look as Pharazôn leaves. We get a quick scene with Miriel and her senile father, and she tells him that she is doing what he wanted, and he begs her not to go to Middle-earth because only darkness waits there for her. Then back to Nori and the probably wizard. He is turning a spring in a rock to ice in order to soothe his arm. He is mumbling in some other language and in a sort of trance. For reasons, Nori decides to touch his freezing arm, and the ice promptly sticks her hand to the limb and begins to climb her arm. She tries to rouse him and eventually succeeds, tossing her a good 10 feet. He looks around and sees her on the ground, confused. She gets up and runs, leaving him even more confused and now worried that she flinched away from him when he tried to help her up. Back in Lindon, the elves are hosting Durin at a small dinner with Elrond, Celebrimbor, King Gil-galad, and a few others. Nastily polite chit-chat is had by all. Durin talks Gil-galad out of his table, eventually revealing he lied about the stone it was made of being sacred as he and Elrond walk back to Moria later. After the dinner, Gil-galad reveals his real reason for having Celebrimbor work with Elrond and sending Elrond to the dwarves for help on Celebrimbor's forge tower. And here is where we reach peak retard in this series. Mind you, that is a hard and oft fought for title in this show, but this scene is it. I am surprised J.R.R. Tolkien's corpse did not rise from the grave and go on a rampage to wipe any and all hands that had anything to do with the scene from existence. Gil-galad takes Elrond out to the tree with the rotting leaves from the episode that had the meteor fall in it. Episode 1, I think, or might have been 2. The stupid is running it together in my head. There he reveals that the tree is rotting and that he hoped to stop the rot by sending Galadriel to the Undying Lands, taking her war with her. Like I said, retarded. He says it shows the light of the elves is fading, and he wants Elrond to break his oath to Durin to reveal what he learned in Moria. Elrond refuses, and the king tells him a story about an elvish warrior fighting a Balrog over the lost Silmaril. The elf was trying to hide it in a tree, and the Balrog was trying to destroy the tree to get to the Silmaril. And here is where it goes full retard. Lightning strikes the tree, somehow melting the Silmaril, mixing with the elves and the Balrog's power, and creating Mithril. Gil-galad wants to know if the dwarves found the Mithril because he wants as much as he can to give to every elf so that they can absorb the light in order to save the elves. I had to pause the show at that point, or my eyes would have rolled so far back in my head they would have popped right the hell out of my skull. This story is not only lore-breaking, but lore-breaking in the most droolingly imbecilic way possible. In order for this story to be true, there can be no other source of Mithril in the entire Tolkien universe. Unfortunately for the illiterate jackasses at Amazon, who obviously never even picked up a Tolkien book and get most of their Tolkien knowledge from watching Peter Jackson's movies, the Númenóreans also had Mithril. This asinine tale might hold water if Númenor were already gone. But since it isn't, this is more incompetent, talentless hackery from whoever scribbled the scripts for this show in crayon on their nursery wall. The Mithril angle aside, The whole thing makes about as much sense as the hobbits being psychotic, the Númenóreans needing Galadriel to teach them how to fight, or the human villagers putting Bronwyn in charge at the Elven Tower. Moving on. The Númenóreans are celebrating one last time before they show off to war, and Isildur tries to get his newly promoted buddy to get him a berth on one of the ships, since his dad wouldn't. Dude Bro says no, and Isildur walks off after letting his buddy hit him twice for screwing up their chance with the Sea Guard. Then it cuts clumsily to Keeman deciding to burn the Númenórean ships, probably to get into Isildur's sister's pants. And of course Isildur is stowed away on that very ship. The coincidences on this show simply abound. He struggles with Keeman over the lamp, and the lamp falls next to the spilling oil or brandy or whatever it was in the barrels Keeman opened up all over the floor. Flames erupt and the two idiots run for it. Isildur hauls Keeman out of the sea, and then lies about what they were doing to his father, claiming Keeman had been in a fishing boat nearby when the ships went up and Isildur jumped in to save him. I have no idea why he did not throw Keeman to the wolves. Isildur has been a whining, twit-brained idiot this entire show thus far, and I'm not sure how they plan to turn him into a believable warrior leader by the time they get to the War of the Last Alliance that brings down Sauron. After the ships burn, the Númenóreans have 3 left. Muriel decides she wants to go on as planned over the suggestions of delaying from Pharazôn. It is at this point I was yet again thrown out of the story for the umpteenth time this episode. Númenor is a bloody big island. They would have more ships and more ports from which to draw ships. A few burning in the harbor would not stop an army from sailing, and it would only delay long enough for the reprovision of the replacement ships. Then we get Celebrimbor both apologizing and trying to guilt-trip Elrond at the same time. Neat trick. The elder elf says he tried to get the king to include Elrond in on their plan, but the king refused. Celebrimbor then tells a story about Elrond's father that is meant, I think, to guilt Elrond into doing what Gil-galad wants, namely, getting the mithril from the dwarves. And then Bitchface is back. Seriously. Galadriel is certifiably mental. She has one note and one note only. Must go to war with orcs and destroy Sauron. Anything that either gets in her way or does not add to that obsession is bulldozed, which is how she wound up in the dungeon like a moron. Anyway, she tries to talk to not Aragorn and get him to help her in her war again. He finally seems to think about it. This is stupidly intercut with scenes from the humans that decamped from the Elven Tower showing up at Adar's camp. Adar makes Krusty McFarmer kill a boy to prove his loyalty, and it looks like he's about to do it when the over-caffeinated editors cut away yet again, to the humans in the tower this time. Theo is practicing his archery, and Arondir tries to give him some pointers only to get snarked in return. Arondir actually handles it well and gets through to Theo enough that the boy tells him about the sword shard. The elf recognizes it from something carved into the walls of the fortress, and when he explains to Bronwyn what he is thinking, she goes from wannabe Amazon princess to Chicken Little in no time flat. She was completely bipolar in this episode. I might have said it earlier in this video, but Durin was easily the best thing in this entire episode, and it is possible he is the best thing in this entire series. He and Elrond hit the road with Durin's new table, the dwarf admitting he was lying about the stone being sacred, but that Disa had been nagging him about getting a new table. Elrond jokes that he wants Durin to tell him the table is from him. And finally, I could stop this madness. The Númenóreans and the Queen and Galadriel and not Aragorn all marched down to the harbor and board the ships. And I felt nothing. In the Fellowship of the Ring, when they marched out of Rivendell on their quest, it was rousing and you felt excited. In the Two Towers, when the Rohan evacuated to Helm's Deep, you felt the peril but also the determination. When Faramir leads the horsemen of Gondor out to try to retake Osgiliath, and the people in the city are throwing roses at their feet as they ride through the streets, you felt the despair and the senseless tragedy of it. And when the Rohirrim arrive for the battle at Minas Tirith, you get goosebumps as the battle comes to grip you. With the Númenóreans riding through the city and boarding the ships, there was nothing. Not even the music could stir a single feeling from me but relief, knowing the show was almost over. On top of that, the armor and costuming once more made its dreadfulness known. The regular troops' armor was bad enough, but the Queen was wearing a screen-printed, long-sleeved shirt to make it look like she was wearing a full-scale male shirt rather than a cheap plastic vest that was supposed to look like gold-embossed scale armor. Not even Galadriel's armor, probably the best of the sorry lot, was good, looking like she had looted the grave of a 16th century conquistador for it. And what the hell did Elendil have on his head? Did they think he was a Valkyrie? What was that? And as the ships left the docks, the green screen also made itself known in all of its terrible glory. The CGI was once again dreadful. But at least that was the end of the show. I cannot tell you how many times I checked to see how much time was left. This was easily the hardest episode to get through, and easily the worst episode. And that is despite the fact that Galadriel only had a handful of scenes. Among those joining the bad character assembly this show is racking up, this week Arryn, Isildur, Elendil, and Adar joined the ranks of, well, everyone in this stupid show except Durin, Disa, and Durin's father. Yes, it is that bad. By the end of it, I just wanted to go to bed, not sit here and relive it. When House of the Dragon ends, I'm exhilarated by what I just saw, eager for what next week has in store. Wings of Power, I just want it to be over so my brain will stop hurting with all the stupid I am watching. I know that is a depressing note to end this on, but send your complaints to Amazon. If you are enjoying my pain, please hit the like button. Subscribe to the channel, comment down below, and share the video. If you enjoy history and other social science topics, I'm starting a second channel for that called An Education with the Social Misanthrope. I will leave that link in the description as well. I think that is all the housekeeping, and I will be back soon with another video. Probably the spoiler-free House of the Dragon review this weekend.